The Dungeons & Dragons starter set was released in the July of 2014, alongside the introduction of the 5th edition of the game. Inside this box set was everything a fledgling D&D player needed: a slim set of rules, a set of dice, and pre-generated characters. And at the heart of this box was an adventure module steeped in classic D&D charm: the Lost Mine of Phandelver. Set in the frontier town of Phandelver, it had everything from goblin ambushes, hidden treasure, and villains operating in the shadows. The starter set became an instant hit, and over a decade later remains a cornerstone of 5th edition, as many players first dive into the worlds and wonders of Dungeons & Dragons. In the adventure, after surviving the goblin ambush and delving into the treacherous Cragmaw hideout, the adventurers finally arrive in Phandelver, the rustic frontier town promised by Gundren Rockseeker. But instead of the peaceful respite they might have expected, they find a town gripped by fear. At this point in the module, it is explained to the Dungeon Master that the town of Phandelver has been plagued by a gang of ruffians known as the Redbrands, led by the mysterious wizard Glassstaff. The Dungeon Master is told that the town has been getting extorted, bullied, and controlled by the Redbrands, suggesting some of the NPCs in town mention the horrible things happening. This is supposed to act as a plot hook, potentially cluing in the PCs that they should do something to stop these thugs. But why should they care? These things aren't happening to them. And if they are really good players, they might even be more interested in finding Gundren than worrying themselves over a gang of criminals. This is the issue many dungeon masters, new and old, face: getting your players and their characters to care about stopping your villains. D&D isn't just about slaying monsters and getting loot. It's a way to tell interesting and compelling stories. And at the heart of every great story, it's conflict. So conflict is the driving force behind a story. It is what creates tension, stakes, and a reason for the characters to make choices. As a dungeon master, it's your role to provide the players with situations that require them to make meaningful choices to resolve the tension. No conflict, no tension. No stakes, no story worth telling. The problem is, conflict only works if the players and their characters care. Without emotional investment, your villains are just stat blocks, and their evil schemes are just events in the campaign. So, how do you get your player characters to care? Well, you have your villains kick a kitten. I know how that sounds, but kicking the kitten is a storytelling trope that refers to a moment when a villain does something cruel or petty or evil purely to establish or reinforce their role as the antagonist of a story. It's commonly used in books or film to make the villain more hateable, ensuring that the audience have a visceral, emotional reaction to their actions. It creates instant investment in stopping the antagonist by showing just how irredeemable awful they are. For example, few moments in action cinema make you sit up and seethe with anger quite like the inciting incident in John Wick. It's not a grand display of villainy or a high-stakes master plan. It's something far smaller and far more personal. In a single act of cruelty, Iosif Tarasov, the entitled son of the Russian mob boss, other antagonist of the story, cements himself as a truly despicable person. The scene begins with John Wick grieving the loss of his wife. Alone in his home, he receives a final gift from her. A small, floppy-eared beagle named Daisy. Now, the dog is a symbol of his wife's love, a way for John to hold on to something good in his life. Daisy is more than just a pet. She's John's emotional tether to humanity. Enter Iosef Tarasov, the spoiled son of the Russian mob boss. After an encounter at a gas station where John refuses to sell his prized 1969 Mustang, Iosef, blinded by entitlement and arrogance, breaks into John's home with his gang. They beat John unconscious, steal his car, and most infamously, kill Daisy. The moment is devastating. We don't see the act itself, but we hear Daisy's whimpers, followed by silence. When John wakes up, he finds Daisy lying lifeless on the floor, her small body curled in a pool of blood. It's a heartbreaking moment, not just because of what it means to John, but because of the sheer pettiness of the act. Iosef didn't kill Daisy for survival or strategy. He did it purely out of malice, because he could. This is a textbook example of the kick the kitten trope, both almost literally and figuratively. Iosef's cruelty is unforgivable, not because it's part of some grand, calculated, evil plan, but because it's so petty and personal. Killing Daisy didn't serve any purpose beyond showcasing Iosef's complete lack of empathy and humanity. It's a small act of cruelty, but it cuts deeper than any larger-scaled atrocity could. And sometimes, that's exactly what players need in a campaign. Not an epic betrayal or a world-ending threat, but a small, sharp act of cruelty that feels deeply personal. It's these injustices, senseless, intimate, and cruel, that ignite a fire in the players to seek justice. Whether it's a beloved NPC, a cherished possession, a symbol of hope, a villain's act of petty evil makes the conflict feel personal. And in D&D, this is where the fun begins. When your players aren't just trying to stop the villain, but are driven to make them pay for what they've done. Throughout the Phandelver section of the Lost Mine of Phandelver module, the Dungeon Master is told to explain the villainy of the Redbrands through the NPCs in town. Toblin Stonehill is upset that the Redbrands are being allowed to terrorize the town by the failures of the Town Master. Barthen of Barthen's Provisions tells the PCs that the Redbrands are shaking down the local businesses. And even Darren Edermath in the Orchard suggests that the PCs do something to stop the Redbrands. My big issue with this is that the PCs are being told over and over how bad the Redbrands are without ever being shown their evil firsthand. There's only one scripted encounter with the Redbrands in the adventure before the Redbrand hideout, where 4 ruffians attempt to harass or rob the players, and it's told to happen, quote, after speaking with a number of NPCs in town. This is a huge missed opportunity. An opportunity to show the Redbrands actually terrorizing the people of the town. So here's what I would suggest to implement the kick the kitten method. When the PCs first arrive into town with the cart that they were sent to deliver to Barthen's Provisions by Gundren Rockseeker, the first building they will pass is Barthen's Provisions. This will likely be their first stop in town. When they go to enter, 2 Redbrand ruffians are flanking the door, and they ignore the PCs as they enter. And inside, they find a few other Redbrand characters. Now, the Redbrands aren't just one person. They're a group, a faction. If you are unfamiliar, a faction is a group or organization that has its own identity, goals, and often unique beliefs. For example, think of the Galactic Empire from Star Wars. The Empire is a faction that has their own goals and beliefs. They represent control, power, and the subjugation of the galaxy under a totalitarian regime where peace is achieved only through fear and force. When you introduce a faction into your D&D campaign, it's important to introduce your player characters to one or two NPCs who fully embody the ideologies of that faction. So, by getting to know the NPC and the way they speak and act, you better understand what the faction is all about. So back to the Empire example, Darth Vader is the Empire's ideology manifest. His imposing presence, unwavering loyalty to the Emperor, and a strict adherence to the Imperial Order makes him the embodiment of the Empire's totalitarian ideals. And through his character, we better understand what the Empire represents. And that's exactly what we're going to do with the Redbrands. As they are presented in the book, most of the Redbrands are nameless goons that the PCs are told are bad until they try to kill the PCs in the street. What we need to do is come up with a Redbrand lieutenant. Someone who isn't the boss, that's Iarno, the Glassstaff, but is just under him in importance. And in my game, that character is Bones. Bones is a short, rat-looking man with a patchy goatee. And Bones has a bodyguard as well. A massive, dumb brute named Jed. And these two characters represent everything the Redbrands are about. Bones is wiry, but clever and manipulative. He's cunning and wicked, but also arrogant and greedy. He believes himself king of Phandelver when the Glassstaff isn't around. The other side of the coin, Jed, his bodyguard, is dumb, but cruel and brutal. He can easily drag someone out of their shop by their hair and brutally beat them with his bare hands if they refuse to pay their extortion. These two characters will be the first Redbrands the PCs meet when they enter Barthen's provisions. When the characters arrive, Bones and his crew will be right in the middle of casually extorting Barthen. When the PCs see this, they will immediately recognize one thing. These guys are crooks, and they need to be stopped. This encounter is very important, and will set the tone of the next chapter of the adventure. From this moment forward, if you play this carefully and you pull it off, the Redbrands will be priority target number 1 for your characters. Here's how I would run it. The interior of Barthen's provisions is tense. Inside are 5 figures. 4 are draped in red cloaks, their presence radiating menace, while the 5th, likely Barthen himself, stands nervously behind the counter, his hands trembling as he counts out gold pieces into a small purse. 2 of the red-cloaked figures stand in the center aisle. One has horrific scars marring his face, the other sports a worn eye patch, and they toss a jar of pickles back and forth, their game careless and mocking. Nearby, a massive bald man leans against a shelf, watching the scene with a toothy grin of amusement. Perched on the counter, another red-cloaked figure looks down at Barthen, his posture relaxed, but his gaze sharp. As the jar soars through the air once more, the man with the eye patch fumbles his catch and crashes into a shelf, sending plates tumbling to the ground with a deafening smash. For a moment, the room is silent. Then, as if on cue, the red-cloaked men burst into raucous laughter, their voices filling the space as Barthen flinches, his expression pale and fearful. The figure on the counter will say, "Keep it down, numbskulls." And then he turns to Barthen. "You better make sure it's all there, Grandpa. We wouldn't want something bad to happen to your little old shop, would we?" Barthen, shaking. No, of course not. Only 2 more, and there, it's all there. Please don't damage anything else." The figure on the counter snatches the purse from Barthen, who flinches. Now at this point, PCs will likely step in. That is why it is important to play this carefully. You don't want a full confrontation with the Redbrands, not yet. The scene only serves to build the tension, and it's a kick the kitten moment to make the characters want to do something about the Redbrands in town. In the module, it does suggest some dialogue for the Redbrands in the, quote, Redbrand Ruffian section. I suggest we can pull some of the ideas for that encounter to flavor our own. So if the PCs come into Barthen's and say anything to Bones or his thugs, we can have an idea for how to handle the situation ready. To avoid an outright combat, but still make the Redbrands hateable, I would suggest perhaps the one with the eye patch. He'll say, "Looky what we got here, Bones. A couple of lost puppies wandered into town." And Jeb, this massive man standing in a corner, will just say, "Puppies." But it's very important that we rely on 2 factors here. 1, Bones is smart and arrogant. He wouldn't press his luck, especially after he just got paid. He would perhaps steal an apple from a shelf and take a bite from it, as if to assert his power. And he'll tell his men, "Our business here is handled. Let the puppies be. Anyways, we don't pick up strays." And he will leave to exit, viewing the PCs beneath him. This should be enough to have the party let him leave. However, if the characters push the issue, we can lean on our second factor, Barthen. Barthen does not want anyone harmed, especially not in his shop or for his honor. He will immediately step in and try to stop the party. I don't want any trouble with them. Please don't hurt anyone. Please just drop it. It's all right. Not in my shop. Just please let them go." This will show that his concern for peace outweighs his own fear. This is a man who's clearly been through this before, who understands the consequences of standing up to the wrong people. And yet he still begs the party to back down, not out of cowardice, but to protect his shop, to protect his community, and possibly even protect the characters. And hopefully this will be enough for the parties to stay their hand, but if not, have the confrontation outside and shoot for one of the Redbrands, hopefully Bones, to escape and report back to the Glass Staff. But now, after the Redbrands leave, we can have Barthen explain the situation with the Redbrands to the characters. I'm sure they will ask. Originally, they were being told this information unprompted. Now they're curious, they're interested. And it's not going to be a simple exposition dump about the Redbrands being local thugs. They don't need to be told that the Redbrands are bad at this point. They've seen it. Storytelling in D&D is all about engagement and choices. Sure, you can have the NPCs in town explain how bad the Redbrands are, but it's not nearly as effective as showing it. When the players see it in action, they're no longer just completing a quest. They're responding to injustice that they have witnessed themselves. This is the power of the Kick the Kitten method. It's not about painting the villains as generic evil. It's about making their actions personal, giving the player something tangible to care about. At the end of the day, as awful as it sounds, the Kick the Kitten method isn't just about making your villains look evil. It's about creating stakes that matter. It's about transforming a quest into a cause, giving your players something to fight for beyond gold or experience points. When you show them the impact of a villain's cruelty firsthand, when they see the fear in an NPC's eyes or feel the weight of a senseless act, it stops from being just another encounter, and it becomes personal. The beauty of this method lies in its simplicity. It doesn't need elaborate backstories or convoluted schemes. Sometimes, all it takes is a scared child clutching a toy after the villain's minions storm through a village, leaving nothing but ash and ruin behind. Or an NPC offers information to the villain to protect his family, only to be struck down anyways. Or somebody killing John Wick's dog. That's when your story stops being a game and becomes something they'll remember long after the dice have stopped rolling. Because, honestly, at the end of the day, nothing makes victory sweeter than knowing exactly why it matters. Thank you so much for watching. Stay sharp and farewell, adventurers.